The detectives investigating the Biggie homicide struggled with a lack of hard evidence. Murders are tough to solve, drive-by shootings are even tougher. Because even if witnesses get a license plate number for the suspect's car and you find that car, you still have the challenge of proving who was in the car. In fact, the murder of death row insider Aaron Heron Palmer in 1997 remains unsolved to this day because even though police found the van that the shooters got out of when they walked up and shot Heron in his car at an intersection, they couldn't prove who those shooters actually were. So the Biggie homicide detectives had a suspect vehicle description of a mid-90s Chevy Impala. And that car became a focal point of much of the investigation since I think it was the most solid piece of evidence they had. Find the car, and maybe you get lucky and it's registered to the killer. But even the car proved problematic for this case because the witnesses who saw the shooting couldn't even agree on what color it was. So in this episode, let's actually look at what each witness said about the shooter's car. And at the end, I'll show you a photo of an Impala that is very interesting. One of the theories in the Biggie case that has gotten a lot of attention is the theory that a dirty cop named David Mack orchestrated the shooting with his college friend, a mortgage broker in San Diego. And one of the cornerstones of this theory is the claim that Mack owned a mid-90s Impala. But Mack's Impala was painted black. And this is where we get into the whole disagreement over what color the shooter's car was. Because if it's confirmed that the shooter's car wasn't black, then the David Mack theory is essentially dead. So why is there so much confusion over the color? Well, the witnesses who were closest to the shooting claimed the shooter's car was actually green, or a bluish-gray color. But the witnesses who were farther away, they thought it was black. So let's try to settle this by looking at the actual witness statements and where those witnesses were positioned when the shooting happened. It was the middle of the night, and only the witnesses who were the farthest away from the shooting thought the Impala looked black. They were an MTA bus driver who was approaching Fairfax on Wilshire going westbound, and Reggie Blaylock and Paul Offord in the security vehicle. Ken Story, who was Puffy's driver, thought he might have seen an Impala parked across the street facing the other direction when they'd first pulled out of the parking garage, but he didn't see the shooter's car when the shooting happened. So the people literally the farthest away of all the witnesses thought that in the dark, under the streetlights, it looked black. Everybody else who saw the Impala up close said it was green or blue. Lil Cease, who was seated right behind Biggie and who is the closest surviving witness to the shooting, said the car was dark green. G-Money, who was Biggie's driver, said the car was greenish. And in Puffy's Suburban, Anthony Jacobs, who was in the third row of seats in the back, also looked back and said the car was light greenish. Detectives even showed him photos taken in various lighting conditions of both black and greenish color Impalas, and he still picked out the green one. And Gene Deal, seated behind Puffy, would claim the Impala was steel blue or gray.
Now, what kind of car was that then?
It was a SS Impala.
Okay.
97.
Okay. 97?
Yeah.
Okay, what color was it?
I think it was steel. I don't know if it was steel blue, steel gray, because Tony had mentioned it like, yo, that shit is fat. You know what I'm saying? Because he in the car and shit like that. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying?
So it's kind of like a gray or a dark color to you?
Like, no, it's a light, like a steel color. You know what I'm saying?
Steel?
A light color. Okay. Like either steel gray or steel blue or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Like a sky blue or steel gray, something like that.
Okay. Sky blue. And it was like a new car?
Yeah.
And then, if that's not enough, on the 911 tape, as Big's friends are racing him to the hospital and trying to save his life, the 911 operator asks what color the suspect's car was. And the answer is emphatic.
It was Impala?
Yes.
What color was the
Blue, aqua blue.
aqua blue? How many people were in the vehicle?
So that's 5 witness accounts that the Impala was a greenish or blue-green color. And 2 of the witnesses who said that were Cease and Big's driver G-Money, both of whom also worked with police on the 2 composite sketches of the shooter. That's how close they were to this incident. And even the flyer that Russell Poole distributed in the weeks after the murder said they were looking for a gray-green Impala. But this was way before David Mack was ever looked at as a potential suspect. So did the suspect's car change colors because Mack's Impala was black and it needed to match for that whole theory to work? I don't know. And I know there are people who have put Poole on a pedestal, and I don't mean to be disrespectful to those people, and they think I'm shilling for the LAPD, even though they probably don't even know this series exists, and I honestly couldn't care less if they win or lose some lawsuit. So let's try to stick to the facts of the case. What changed that made the Impala black instead of green? Why are witnesses considered credible enough to give you a composite sketch of the shooter, but then those same guys aren't credible when they tell you what color the car is? I think these are fair questions. And to further drive home this whole point about how hard it would have been to tell what color this car was at night from a distance, I've used this police reenactment footage of Biggie's murder numerous times throughout this series. And the Impala in the video looks black, right? I think it does. Well, when they filmed this reenactment, they had just impounded Suge Knight's Impala as part of an unrelated investigation. And so they used his car in this reenactment since they had it on hand. And Suge Knight's Impala was actually dark red. The color was technically called dark cherry metallic, and it was one of only 3 color options that you could get, with the others being black and dark gray-green, with that green color being the rarest of the 3 options, with the fewest vehicles sold in that color. The FBI also had their own files on the Biggie homicide case, and years ago they released their heavily redacted report on this investigation. And for some reason, this report implies that mid-90s Impalas were rare, claiming that very few are sold in Southern California. Now, I grew up around muscle cars, and if you have any experience with them or with lowriders, you know that this is a ridiculous statement. At least in Southern California, those 90s Impalas were everywhere. But you don't have to take my word for it. Here are some of the mid-90s Impalas that the LAPD found records for in Southern California. This list alone has nearly 1,800 mid-90s Impalas located in Southern California. Oh yeah, super rare. They were so rare that multiple people connected to this story had Impalas. Keefe D, a former shot caller for the Southside Crips, who spoke with Biggie at the party on the night of the murder, drove a mid-90s Impala, as did at least 1 or 2 other Southside Crips. Suge Knight had one. DJ Quick's bodyguard allegedly had one. Wardell Poochie Faust had one. And Faust, aka Poochie, is the person that I believe killed Biggie. He was a regular enforcer around death row who had reportedly done jobs like this before. And he allegedly owned a mid-90s Impala. Many of the guys in Suge Knight's inner circle got cars as a perk. And then there's this photo, which was recently sent to me. This shows a mid-90s Impala that appears to be in that gray-green color, and its owner has yet to be identified. But guess where it's parked in this photo? In the gated parking lot of One Stop Auto, Suge Knight's personal car shop in El Monte, California during the 90s, where death row artists and the gang members in Suge's inner circle got their cars customized. This photo was sent to me by someone who worked at One Stop Auto. But without a license plate or VIN visible, I can't identify who owned it. It looks like the registration is still taped to the windshield, indicating that it had recently been purchased. So did the owner buy it and then bring it down to the shop to get some work done? I'm told it wasn't at the shop for very long. It could just be a coincidence. Based on the rarity of the color, of the approximately 1,800 mid-90s Impalas that were registered in Southern California at the time, there would have only been about 350 green mid-90s Impalas in the region. And here's one of them. The same color that the guys in Big Suburban said that the shooter's car was, parked in the fenced-in section of Death Row's custom car shop. I'm not saying it's the one, but it's a pretty big coincidence, and I thought it was worth sharing.